Hi, my name's Chris. I do Football Manager related stuff on Twitch. For the last 2 months we managed Ytterhogdals IK in Sweden. And we were forced to play a possession-based tactic by the club and the club's fans. They wanted us to do this because it's club philosophy. So given that I'm not exactly a big fan of possession-based systems, we still managed to pull it off. And the circumstances of the club are rather dire. I thought I'd make a review about this, so you can get some insight into how you can play this sort of tactic, even in lower leagues, without financial resources, and how you can pull it off. And we will branch a little bit in the circumstances too, so you get some impression of why certain things went that way. So let me tell you a bit about the club first, before we get into the tactic. Ytterhogdals IK are a club in Sweden in the 3rd division at the time of speaking. So even though it is called 1st Division North, this is League 3. We do not deserve to be in this league at all. This is a small club that is from a village in the middle of nowhere in Sweden, as far as I'm aware. The village contains like 250 to 500 people, inhabitants, not fans. And the stadium is for 2.5k people. So yeah, there's nothing available basically. All the facilities are poor. The youth intake is non-existent more or less. And in addition to this, they've got the club philosophy to sign English player from, well, released players. So it's an interesting story, but not part of this video. The relevant part is there's no financial background to be had here. This is a club that is mostly financed by the local farmers, and that's about it. So we are in circumstances that are vastly inferior to most of the league, and definitely vastly inferior in comparison to other clubs in Sweden overall. We cannot afford scouting, we cannot afford decent staff, we cannot afford a good training center, nothing. And usually, if I go to the chairman and ask for a feeder club or something, nothing happens. This doesn't work. The chairman allows us to spend some money on wages, but most of the players tell us with some strictness that they do not want to have anything to do with the club. So these are the circumstances of the club, or at least these were the circumstances of the club, until we managed to get promoted this season. Again, there have been a few seasons of financial reconsolidation in between, but overall we've made sustained progress. And to show you this, I will show you the staff that we have. This is our staff. This is the wages they are on. Most of them are not good. Just as a prime example, our goalkeeping coach is horrible, but we needed somebody to do the goalkeeping coaching. And this is enough for 1-star training, and that's it. So this is bottom skill level. And we went after stuff with good wages. Not so much stuff that had good quality, just because we couldn't afford anything else. Same with the scouting. Most of the time we didn't have a scouting package. So to pull this off like this requires a certain creativity, let's say, with the players. You might also already be used to the fact that trials can be abused. So we did that, mostly with English players, because that's the club philosophy. But I wanted to give you an overview over the system that we played, why we played it that way, and what each player contributed. Because I feel there's a lot of misinformation on YouTube, generally speaking, on how to pull off certain things. And I think context is very relevant to somebody pulling off something like this. So, with that said, let's go through the players and their respective roles. I already sorted this in basically the importance of the players. So the first team is what's selected here, and then I selected players that were used as rotation options in case it was needed, or as bench options. For some further background, there's 5 substitutes to be had in this league, and 7 bench spots, usually. So about half of these. There's a few other players down there, trialists, peoples out on loan, and youth players that didn't make an appearance or are not relevant really. These are around, don't think like this, we used all of them, right? This is our core squad more or less. And a lot of them are not good. But they have some quality. So let's start with the goalkeeper position. What did we have available there? There's 2.5 goalkeepers available that played throughout the season. The first one is Edvard Setterberg. He played the majority of the season, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And the important thing about him is he doesn't have any major weaknesses for this level of play. That's something that was really important to us. He doesn't improve much. He doesn't complain. And he had decent performances overall. And once he dropped off in form, we replaced him with our second goalkeeper, Alexander Westberg. Alexander Westberg has one blatant weakness, and that's aerial reach. We compensated for that with the fact that we have 2 central defenders that are really good headers. I'll show you in a few minutes. So these 2 goalkeepers are more or less on the same level. And what's good about them is specifically that they are really cheap. So we made do with them, and that's fine. It worked out well. We did not concede the least amounts of goals in the league. I think we were 4th least goals conceded. That worked out well. It's not down to the goalkeepers only though. This is mainly due to defense, and I will show you in a second. So what's the problem with these 2? None of these 2 will improve going forward, not by any stretch of the imagination. There are other options here, but they didn't play well because they didn't train well. Overall though, these 2 were well used to being in the squad. They have been long-term members, so they provide some stability. Then on the right wingback position, we play this as, well, let's get back to goalkeeper for a second. We instructed them to take fewer risks, because we realized that they with the long passing it just didn't work out. So we distributed the ball short, as you can see here, and tried to play out of defense. Where is it in transition? Here it should be. Well, it's throwing long right now, but for most of the season we distributed it short. And we went with the long throws once we realized that this is possible for us, because both of them have decent throwing. And we had, let's say, a good pressing going on most of the time. On the right wingback position we used Ngongo. So I'll show you the player here. We used him as a wingback on attack duty. As you can probably tell, he's got really great physicals and the rest is not to speak of. The long throws are decent, but we go with short throws, because the other wingback option doesn't have good long throws. And that trait wasn't available for the majority of the season. We just trained that. He's a beast though. From a physical perspective, he's a beast. He can do everything, and more often than not, we used him to tackle players the hard way, even though his tackling is bad. Which might have resulted in a few cards, but overall, the league wasn't up to the standard from a physical point of view. So this player doesn't only provide some width on the pitch, but he specifically drives forward the entire time. He's not a good dribbler, doesn't matter though. As you will see later on, we have the space going forward. So for him to have the physicals usually means that he can run for the ball and provide an overlap. And this is what we did most of the time in case it made sense, formation-wise. So especially against one defender, one wingback or fullback formations that either have their wingers high up on the pitch, just like this, or that play with a solo wingback, he had a lot of space. And that worked out just fine because he was able to come back. Now you can see already we had specific instructions for him to compensate for his weaknesses. So it's not like this player is great by any stretch of the imagination, other than his physicals. For this league level, he's got really bad passing, really bad mentals overall, technicals aren't great, his tackling is really bad for a defender. Still, we made it work. How did we do that? So we instructed him to dribble less, to shoot less often because he's not a good shooter, to cross less often. That's partly because he's only a decent crosser, but more importantly, there's nobody to pick it up front. So just try to retain possession. It's in line with the philosophy anyway. And then fewer passing risks, obviously. That worked out well. I could talk about the partnership with August Tellander, but we'll come to that later maybe. Yeah. Then we've got Smajlović. Smajlović played as a ball-playing defender most of the season, and I consider that an error. Because the problem is not so much that his passing is really bad. I'll show you the player for a second. So as a ball-playing defender, you can see he lacks a bit of on the technical side. But for that level in the league, as a defender, that's okay-ish. He can play the odd long ball. People make mistakes. That said, we should have used him as a central defender most of the time. His composure is a bit bad, but the first thing you can already see here is he's got really good jumping reach and decent strength for this level of league. So that worked well. And we specifically instructed him to pass it short. After 2/3 of the season, we realized that he still plays too many long balls due to being a ball-playing defender, and there's nobody to pick it up front. And whilst that provided some penetration, some of the time, it also gave away possession a lot to the opposition. So we removed that. And these days he tries to play as a central defender. That said, that's one of these mistakes that you can also compensate throughout the season. It's not like it was game-changing for us most of the time. So we were able to do this despite bad instructions. And as you can see, taking fewer risks, less dribbling, basically a box standard central defender role. The same can be said about Adam Hellström. Just that Adam Hellström is a player that we brought in on cheap from a big club, and well, he developed in a decent manner. He doesn't have great acceleration, but we've had a bit of luck with the development. He's good. This is a new gen. He's got good traits, and overall he got better. Last season, the season prior to this one, he was a constant source of error. So he needed to adapt to the circumstances in the club, and once he settled in, he was fine. These two were the standard partnership. Most of the passes throughout the games were played by these two central defenders. So it's not like the passing happened in midfield most of the time. The passing happened here, and with the wing back, sometimes with Malte Ekman here. And then, last but not least, on the left side, we used Dyrke. Now, Antoine Dyrke is a young prospect that we brought in. We used him as a wingback on support duty. You can probably see here that he's not that great. Don't look too much at the star rating, but his pace is decent, his stamina is decent, he's got good work rate, good teamwork. He's a former Resolute player, personality-wise. These days he's fairly professional. And his passing is decent. So as a passing option, he's fine, most of the time. If he plays a calm passing game, because creativity is not his strong suit. Doesn't matter though. Also, decision-making is okay. So most of the time he will find the pass back, and that's it. And this is exactly what we expect of him. So we told him to take fewer risks, cross less often, dribble less, and shoot less often. Box standard. Basically, play a risk-free game, if you can. We might have changed that from time to time in case it's needed in the game, but this was the initial setup. So that's defense. Not very exciting, right? That said, none of these are really slow. So for a system that pushes up high on the pitch, out of position, this is important. And we still conceded some goals on the counter. It's not like this was free of errors by any stretch of the imagination, but it worked. And it worked more often than not, or we were able to outscore the opposition. I'll come to that later. As you can see here though, there's weaknesses. Acceleration 6 is not good, right? Same with Dyrke here. On a technical level, this is not great, the acceleration isn't great, anticipation's missing. There's better players available if you've got the money. We didn't though. And you might have seen that already. Hellström is on a rather cheap contract because we signed him from a big club as a youth prospect. Smajlović is, for us, this is decent wage. The rest of the league earns double or triple that. And Ngongo, the same, really cheap. But this is a long-term... these are long-term objectives. They came into the club piece by piece. And we just kept them. and managed to get him on decent contracts. Malte Ekman is a long-term servant in the club. Now, you might ask, why the hell would you play somebody in a one-star role, as a Regista at that? The answer is very simple. Star ratings are not everything. And Malte Ekman is a former attacking midfielder, and as you can probably guess by now, he's really good in some things, and he's really bad in the rest. So he considers himself more of an playmaker in attacking midfield, but it doesn't matter. We play him as a Regista, and his thing was, his dribbling wasn't that great, and especially the off-the-ball movement, the teamwork and the vision were really bad. But we realized we can retrain him as a Regista, so we did that. His balance was 8 or 9 back then. That's been years ago. And we just consistently played him. His technicals were wonderful from the start for this league level. That's really great, like 5 points above average passing, so this is wonderful. He can play fantastic killer balls. We taught him to dictate tempo. He brought these mentals here along, but off-the-ball movement and vision were bad, and teamwork is bad, and that still haunts us to this day. But he was able to fulfill his role, and this role is not strictly a role of a Regista. So whilst he's good for the odd killer ball time to time, most of the time he was more of a holding midfielder in disguise. So he had some defensive duties. He fulfilled that a bit. If we think about the roles in central midfield, he was partially some sort of defensive midfielder, but not with a good amount of defensive responsibilities. But mostly he was a passing machine. And in this kind of system, playing a lot of passes with some sense of security is very important. So part of that defensive role is to play a pass that certainly reaches its target. And that's something Malte Ekman can do on a consistent basis for 90 minutes. Doesn't matter if he is pressed, and if he gets pressed really hard, we just play over the wings. Because we have passing options out here that either have physicals to drive forward and back, or that have good passing. So that worked. Malte Ekman most of the time had 2 or 3 players to choose from. Not necessarily driving forward, but it worked out fine. Then, in front of Malte Ekman, we used Nathan Lowe and Niila Forsell. Nathan Lowe is a 31-year-old. We brought him in from England for our level, expensive wages. Later gave him another contract with a bit lower wages. And Nathan Lowe is the player that basically shot us into promotion, together with somebody else, Mr. Woldsund up front. Why is that? Well, we realized he's a good Mezzala overall. He will not improve. The traits fit him just fine though, and the tactic. He runs with ball through center and he shoots from distance. And he came into the club and was in good form from the start. We were lucky there. He doesn't have obvious weaknesses in the physicals, and he doesn't have obvious weaknesses overall. So he is a good option in midfield. And this is one of these examples where you can bring in an older player and it works just fine. He's not even a good personality, by the way. His personality is balanced, and if you look at this, he's outspoken and media friendly. So he's got a lot of controversy. Yet half of the time when we praise his training, he's annoyed by it. And he's really one to be careful around. So it's not like he's easy to manage, but it worked. And most of the time he was in good morale, and we kept him there. That's part of it. So specific instructions for him, well, they were quite obvious. For him to dribble more, because we wanted him to run with the ball, and usually this resulted either in a foul or he had a good chance to score. And he took the long shot whenever he could. Also, his crossing is bad, so do not cross. There's no crossing targets up front anyway. And it doesn't fit a possession-based system. But it's more about the fact that we didn't have a target up front. So these instructions fit him nicely. It worked out well. Then there's Niila Forsell here. Niila Forsell is not good in anything, by any stretch of the imagination. That said, Niila Forsell is a long-term servant to the club. We play him as a box midfielder, And maybe if he's good in anything, it's probably work rate. He's a workhorse, for us at least. And this shows in the physicals, and it shows in the mentals. His technicals were not up to the standard of this league anytime, but he improves a little bit from time to time, and overall he fits his player role just fine these days. And I would say in a way Niila Forsell is the hidden core of this team, because he's always a reliable option, and it's the same as with the other players. We had the patience to let him develop over the years, over 5 years, in different leagues, to let him develop into this position, and more or less he played every season, the entire season. He contributed though, with simple passes, being a reliable passing option for Malte Ekman, and from time to time with a long shot or an assist, but most of the time he was just some sort of mix between a holding midfielder and some sort of workhorse. And that's required in midfield, right? And he's got what it takes to pull it off. So if we look at this midfield three now, usually you need 4 roles in the midfield. You need a defensive option, somebody to run, to put the work in, a creative option, and somebody to score. In terms of goal scoring, usually you want somebody that can take these long shots or at least half chances in midfield. So given these player role, these duties, how do we distribute this in this tactic between the players? And this is unconventional, so I'm willing to go into this. Because usually you have at least one player for each of these roles. But in this tactic, one duty is missing. So Nathan Lowe is obviously the creative one and the scorer. He does provide some running, but on an attack duty, he's too interested in going forward. So he's more of somebody that tracks back, but reluctantly, which fits his personality, by the way. But in any case, he does his job for the team. He provides two of these focuses, creativity and goal scoring. Niila Forsell is a runner, the workhorse of these 3. He provides cover, and he contributes to every phase of play, reliably. And due to the fact that he's not the primary threat of this squad, more often than not, he was not marked specifically. Or he was able to just outmuscle his marker or something like this. Because the marker wasn't strictly the defensive player of the opponent's side. The defensive player usually was used to cover Lowe. So in that sense, some space might open up for Forsell from time to time. And that's good. And Malte Ekman is specifically a passer. I already talked about this. We used him a bit more as a holding midfielder. So that begs the question, who's the defensive option in this midfield triangle? And the answer to this is, there is none. The defensive option is not... It doesn't exist. It's not needed, because this is more about passing and more about keeping possession. And we did that good enough, not great, 60-something%. But throughout the league, we did it good enough that it worked. So this is a case of the midfield triangle is so good in something, or the entire squad is good enough in something, that one of the roles is not needed in that strict manner. That said, all 3 of these players track back and defend. So you can argue that they do that role of defending together. But none of them specifically is a ball winner, and none of them is good in it either. That's just a fact. And then up front, we've got August Tellander here. August Tellander is a long-term servant to the club. We play him as an inverted winger on support duty because his anticipation isn't good. The rest of it, though, he developed nicely. He didn't develop much as a player, but he got more focused for his role. And he was happy with the club for most of the time. He isn't right now. But throughout the season he was happy. This trait he learned from the striker doesn't matter much. Overall, he's really pacey. He's got good composure. And as a former striker, he's got a decent finish. We can see this in the stats. He scored 8 goals and had 8 assists. But as you can see, he's a long-term servant to the club. And he did that throughout every single season. even the one prior to this one, which wasn't very good. So overall, we're happy with him, and he contributed just nicely. Again, long-term servant to the club. He was a reliable option at this point. And on the other hand, we brought in someone new, Dylan Morgan. Dylan Morgan declined immediately after we signed him, at the age of 24. And you can see he has some weaknesses, most notably strength and jumping reach. So he's not a big guy, he's not a strong guy. And his decision making is a bit lacking, his anticipation isn't great, but he's fast. And he's a good dribbler, and he's got a decent long shot. And that's all we wanted of him. We wanted an alternative goal scoring opportunity here. You might realize by now, he's a decent shooter from close range. He's a decent shooter from long range. He's a decent shooter from long range. Forsell, not so much, but his long shots are 8 at this point, I think, and his finishing is 8 too. He's not that bad. So all of these provide alternative goal scoring threats. And we didn't arrive there in one season. This is throughout the seasons, piece by piece, we improved that. So there's a few options here. And they all have some creativity in them, but not that much. So in that sense, there is no star player there. Even though Lowe scored 15 goals throughout the season. But there's no strict best player out of these 4. So that is risk management, you might argue. Because one of these might get injured, and that happened. So the others are perfectly capable to play on in this situation. And then up front, we signed Woldsund. Woldsund is not good at anything as a striker. We played with a target man previously that scored 20 goals in 25 matches. So Hellström is his name. He will sorely be missed. But overall, Markus Woldsund replaced him just fine. Why is that? He doesn't have any weaknesses either. He came in on a very expensive contract and we needed to negotiate this down piece by piece by extending his contract from time to time. But we don't expect much development out of this player. On the other hand, he doesn't have obvious weaknesses. His vision was 7. And we used him as a deep lying forward anyway. Why is that? Well, because he's very flexible. And for him to run into spaces that are open and can provide some creativity works just fine. As a header, he's horrible. He doesn't stand a chance with the crosses and the standard of the central defenders in this league. So that brings me to tactics. I think the usual assessment is you need two and a half ways to score goals. What's our 2.5 ways? Well, way 1 is Woldsund himself. I didn't show this just yet. In 24 matches he managed to score 15 goals. That's just because he's always good for the odd goal. And I think we still have the former available here. Well, some of it anyway. Some of it got lost at this point. But he's a very consistent scorer. This hat-trick here is the exception, not the rule. Usually he scores 1 goal, even in bad matches. He rarely has a really bad match. And that's good. He always provides. Not only for the team in goal-scoring form, though. He provides for the team with assists, or just possession passes. Same as Niila Forsell in a way. And the other ones stand a chance to score 1 too. So the second goal-scoring opportunity is probably Nathan Lowe. As I already showed you, 15 goals in 26 matches. That came as a bit of a surprise to me, to be perfectly honest. I was hoping for something like this, but not in this extreme. And it wasn't that consistent. He scored most of these at the start of the season, but it was fine. It was good enough most of the time. So that's 2 ways. What's half a way? Well, you could argue Tellander is half a way to score a goal. He's always good for a goal. He's got 8. And given that he's no good at anticipation, his supporting role fits him just nicely, works hard. He's not a strong guy though. And the same can be said about Morgan here. Morgan is a good goal scorer overall, but the fact that we played him in an attack duty meant that more often than not he went to the byline and crossed from there or played a pass from there, and you cannot score from the byline. You have to dribble through the penalty area. That happened, but it happened rarely. So he's on 4 goals now and 7 assists. He didn't provide as much as we anticipated, but on the other hand it worked just fine, and he improved the penetration of the squad, which is something that you direly need in a possession-based system. So that worked well. Considering partnerships, you can also say Ngongo and Tellander worked well, because Tellander is not a very physical guy other than his pace, but Ngongo is a pacey guy and a strong guy. He doesn't have much weakness on the physical side. So defensively he was able to run where Tellander wasn't, and to tackle the players and worst case get a yellow card. Doesn't matter much if we can break up the opposition attack. And a similar argument can be made for Morgan and Dyrke. Morgan is more of a creative option and a finisher. He's not one that tracks back very well and works very hard, as you can see. It worked out fine though, because Dyrke is exactly that. So he did the work for him. And overall that partnership worked just fine. What's also interesting is, up front here, same as in the back, we told them not to do specific things, right? So we told him to shoot more often because he's a good shooter, but cross less often, take fewer risks. Same with Niila Forsell. We instructed him to basically do nothing, because he's no good at anything, and that worked. We adapted these sometimes, of course, depending on the way the match went. Same here, cross less often, take fewer risks. No instruction for the shooting. His long shots aren't great, but the finish is okay. So there's more than 2.5 options to score a goal at this point, or standard plays, you might argue, and one comes on top. Our corner takers are really, really bad, I might argue. But with this jumping reach and this strength, or this jumping reach and this strength, even though the heading is bad, or with the jumping reach and strength of Erik Hargedahl, which is one of the replacement options, you can always score from a corner or a free kick. And we did. I think 9 goals throughout the season, so that contributed just nicely. And at the end of the season we had 70 goals that we scored. I didn't expect that. Let's look into the replacement options for a second. So Westberg has bad aerial reach. I already mentioned that, I think, but it doesn't matter much, because our central defenders are good with their jumping reach is great. So they cover for this in case he needs to play. And he did play from time to time, and he did catch some balls in the area with his decent command, but yeah, it might have been a problem if not for the central defenders, so they compensated for that. Kasper Berndtsson is, same as Ngongo, I say challenged on a technical level, specifically going forward. And the same goes for the mentals. Some areas here aren't good. That said, the physicals are outstanding. And for a wingback that is capable of playing both wings, this is just fine. So he was a good replacement option, and he played the first team from time to time too. You might argue he's better than Ngongo. That's a debate to be had for the future. Hargedahl is a former first team player. He didn't develop as well as we wanted him to, but he always performed well, especially due to the fact that he was just able to out-jump whoever came up. And we really had problems with small, fast attackers. But even those long balls, if the central defender is tall enough, sometimes he can jump for them. And that worked out just fine with Hargedahl. Positioning was good enough to defend the area and not so much the man. So tight marking was not a thing. We didn't care. Let the attacker run. Who cares? We will just jump for the ball and head it somewhere else. And that worked out fine most of the time with these long balls. Obviously we were penetrated from time to time in defense. Per Boltegold Blom. Obvious weakness here is acceleration and pace. To be perfectly honest, at this point he's more of a mentoring guy. He doesn't play much, but it doesn't matter. In case we needed him, he contributed nicely. He didn't moan about being in the stands most of the time. And that's what we needed of him. So that worked out just fine. Then we have Christopher Alp. You see already here, there's not that many options. And his traits don't even fit our tactic. Knocking the ball past the opponent on this level is no good for him. It's dangerous. And his early crosses more or less vanished most of the time. But for the odd game where when Dyrke can't play for some reason or is really exhausted, and for rotation, it was fine. Why is that? Well, he doesn't have any obvious weaknesses other than the trait. You might argue the personality isn't great, yeah. So that was okay. He didn't make many games. 7. Provided 2 assists though. That's all we wanted of him. He's cheap. Worked out just fine. Wilmer Melander was used as some sort of replacement for the Regista. He's really bad at it. But he's not bad enough not to be able to play a pass. And for 20 minutes in one game from time to time, it was fine. He didn't make that many games anyway. He played 4 times. Malte Ekman was uninjured the entire season and played through it more or less. And Wilmer Melander is one of those that didn't contribute much. But he was available. That's important from a risk management perspective. We could have ended up using Wilmer Melander and not going up, but that's okay. Because financially speaking, he's cheap and the entire squad is cheap and in line with what the club can afford. Felix Hellberg, this is a really flexible option. He played 13 games, 6.84 rating for a player of his, I might argue, lack of skill is very good. He came on when the opponent was exhausted. He didn't contribute going forward or anything. He was a replacement for Niila Forsell, and he did that just fine. Niila Forsell got banned, I think, one time. So Hellberg played, and that was okay. He didn't do well, but who cares? It was alright. Also, same here, he's a worker. And his personality is good. In fact, we use him as a mentor for a group. Even though he will not make it in this club, obviously. But we keep him as a mentor around for the young players. And specific instructions for him were basically the same as Forsell's. Don't do anything fancy. You're no good at it, don't do anything fancy. And that worked. He passes the ball around. Oliver Swan is a former Sale that came back. And our former Mezzala. He's a bit better in some areas than Lowe, and in a bit worse in some areas. Specifically, the long shots are bad, but his finish is good. To be perfectly honest, he didn't provide as much as we wanted him to. He's got a good trait though, runs with ball through center, and moving the ball to the left, given that he's left-footed, is also okay. He's a decent Mezzala. I expected more of him, but it didn't work. That said, it's not like we suffered once he played. And he still made 28 appearances, mostly as a substitute. He didn't complain about it, he was in good morale most of the season, and he provided. If not goal-scoring chances or goals scored himself, just passing, patient passing. Because at the point in time when he came on the pitch, usually we just needed patient passing. Or somebody fresh that can provide creativity. And he was able to do that. Obviously, we instructed him not to shoot that much from distance and to do more creative passing because he's good at it. Ytterhogdals is our former first team player on the left wing. He's not good, but as you can see here, he's got good off the ball movement and anticipation. He's always available as a passing option, and he's got some sense of creativity in him. Dribbling is also decent. As a finisher, not a chance. He's not a good finisher. He barely played this season. And I'm a bit sorry about that, and we will deal with his complaints going forward, because he didn't play much. But he didn't do well, he didn't train well, so that's it. Morgan played most of the season. That said, I would have been perfectly fine with him going into the season. He wouldn't have done much worse than Morgan. He's still a good creative player for what we need. There's another option here, Antoine Pouget. I'll just show him to you so you can get an impression. This guy, used as an inverted winger on attack duty, looks like he's a very good young prospect, but his personality doesn't translate. No, the performance doesn't exist on the pitch, because his personality is not good enough for this skill to translate to performance on the pitch. That's what I wanted to say. And he's part of a mentoring group. Piece by piece, we will get a perfectionist out of him, or something that's more perfect than balanced. And that's just fine. We give him the time, we don't expect much of him, we realize that he's a personality challenged, I'd say. And that's okay. So we give him the odd game. He doesn't perform that great, but whatever, that's a development option. He's available as a cover though. Then there's Speedy Boy. His real name is Jonathan Berndtsson. He's highly susceptible to injury, so this is a development option, but we don't train him very hard. He was injured throughout the season, but given his role, he's got one thing going for him, and it's in the name, in the nickname. He's fast. He's damn fast. And for games where we are already up, when we are already up 1 goal or 2, he's a good option on the counter. He's not great in anticipating it, he doesn't have perfect off-the-ball movement, but he's good enough to run with the ball if he sees it. And at this point, most of the time, given that we overlap all the time, most of the time the fullbacks were exhausted. So either they got substituted, and more often than not there was a central defender here that was slow and entirely unsuited to cope with a fast attacker, or it was the exhausted wingback out there that put up with Ngongo's performance most of the game, and same with Tellander's. So once Speedy Boy came in, usually there was something to exploit, and that worked out just fine. I don't think he scored that much. Well, 5 goals and 6 assists. So another way to provide something. Then we will go to the striker. Obviously, same here. He has decent passing, but his flair isn't good, his vision isn't that great. So also finishing's not that great. We instructed him not to do these things. So just work with the weaknesses. It's not that hard. Just make sure you keep the ball in case he doesn't know anything else to do with it. And that worked more often than not. Now let's go to Ishak. Speaking about weaknesses, he will not work as a deep lying forward at all. The only thing he can do is run and outmuscle people. And that's why we played him as a pressing forward. And for the matches that we were up 1 goal or 2, he was perfectly fine. But more importantly, we didn't play him that much, and despite his finishing of 4, which is absurdly bad for a striker, he scored 5 goals. And one of these was a hat-trick, by the way. In case you're interested, there's the full episodes of the stream are available here on the YouTube channel. So you can have a look into this. I am not unhappy with his performance to the team, or his contribution towards the team. Overall, that's a decent rating. And once he came onto the pitch, usually it was more about defending anyway. So he provided some cover, and he went where it hurts. For the central defenders, that is. Because at that point, when he came on, they were usually exhausted. And to have a striker that hits you where it hurts you is not a fun thing. If you try to create something and to find your midfielder beyond the striker that comes running for you all the time. Also, he winds up opponents these days. Yeah, that's a minor plus. So, in case you didn't expect it, let's just drop him here. He takes fewer risks, dribbles less, shoots less often, and holds position. There's nothing he contributes from a striker perspective other than being the first defender. That's it. And it worked just fine. And last but not least, we have Berndtsson. He's more of a cover option. But a cover option that we used from time to time, either as a pressing forward or as a deep lying forward, because his passing's decent, even though his vision is bad. That said, he's fast too. He can play inverted winger out here. Something like this. So this works fine too. And he scored the odd goal on the counter. Well, it's 1 goal and 2 assists, but he created chances. So this is more of an option for the future. As you see, he's got good personality, and we gave him some playing time from time to time, once it was needed. And with that overall, we managed to go through the entire season. So, what is it about this tactic that works? One thing that's very clear at this point is it is not the superiority of the player base. This is not we paid a lot of money and signed the best players we had. This is not about the staff and good development. This is not we had great youth intake and took it from there. There's nothing of this kind available here. What's available here is the fact that we adapted the players to their strengths and weaknesses. We had a look into what are they good at, and everything else, if they are bad at it, just remove it from their playing style, as good as we can, and see where it goes from there. And apparently, it goes towards promotion. On a sustained basis, that is. If you do that on a sustained level. At some point you get promoted. And this comes with financial improvements, by the way. The club's financials aren't great right now, because we spend a little bit. But overall, we improved the club's finances over the years, because we didn't overspend on players. At some point, the money comes around, and you can invest in some players that you need. And that's the other half of it. There was a minor investment going on a sustained level. Each year we were able to spend a little bit more of the wage budget, which we never spend in entirety, by the way. We'll go back to that here. We're on 1,400 euros, and it's as much as we ever were at this point. If you see this increase, this is sustainable. We can do this going forward. It doesn't matter if we get promoted or not. And that's really important to me. So this is not some sort of growth attitude, spending it all on a few players, and if we do not get promoted, we will end the stream. This is sustainable. We can do this for another 5 years if we do not get promoted. And challenge for promotion places every single time. That's really important. To me, at least. I consider that reasonable management. Yeah. So the other half is we were able to compensate for weaknesses, but that's especially due to the fact that most of these players do not have obvious weaknesses, and if they do, we instructed them not to play into their weaknesses. That's it. From a tactical point of view, in possession we went with shorter passing, we played out of defense. We went with long crosses because there's nobody up front that is a good target for high crosses. To be perfectly honest, crosses were useless most of the time. And whip crosses are not within the tactical repertoire of our players, so low crosses it was. But most of the time we were hopeful to get either a corner, which we did most of the time, or we did just go with a reasonable short pass back to the roaming wing back, and that worked fine too. It looked a lot like handball from time to time, and that's okay. That's just what's expected of us, and there's a lot of reasonable long shot takers in the squad, so that's just fine. Working the ball into the box, obviously, just to play a patient passing game. We played for set pieces. On one hand, because it's required by the club. On the other hand, because it suits us just fine due to the headers. Our central defenders can always score a goal, so playing for set pieces was fine. We took the free kicks and the penalties too, but they didn't serve much. Our free kick takers aren't that great. It's like 10 or 11 or something. So, yeah, that didn't result in much. But the corners did. And then slightly higher tempo. Why is that? Well, on one hand it was needed. On the other hand, we tried to tire out the opposition. And that worked nicely. So, given that the decision making by the squad is average or above average in some of the areas that are, well, the most important passing stations, a slightly higher passing tempo was just fine. Even though it's not usually the thing you expect from a possession-based system. Because we lost possession more than we care to admit at this point. But it worked. because it unsettled the opposition and created a lot of chances, and this is what we were going for. Minor addition to this, in possession, sometimes if the opponent pushed up really high, we went with more direct passing and pass into space, because our players are perfectly capable to score on the counter. They are not fast enough to pull it off every single game, but they are fast enough to do it once the opposition has been tired out. So in that sense, we fulfilled one primary ambition that I have as a manager. I want the opposition to feel like they run into an open knife if the game is like 60 minutes into the game, once they are tired. Because if they need to score, they should be really vulnerable to concede on the counter. And that worked to a reasonable degree. Not as well as I would have liked, but it was a minor addition to potential goal scoring. Which tells you already about transition instructions. So we counter-pressed. That's required by the club, and also it's just fine with a possession-based system. You want to win the ball back as high up on the pitch as you can, and just recycle possession. Pass it around back in the central defenders. Works just fine. And we went with the counter because the players are fast enough, as I just told you. Also, decision-making's decent, and none of the players up front are really slow. Even Woldsund is perfectly capable to run past the defender, and it's really hard to stop him once he starts to dribble. Because, well, there's no weaknesses to his game. Same with Ishak, by the way. Ishak is not a good dribbler, but try to get somebody with that size and that strength and physical fortitude overall separated from the ball. So that's always dangerous to them. And it worked. And then we throw it long. We didn't instruct him to do this most of the time. That's a recent addition. Most of the time, we try to roll it out. Because this is much more important to us. To retain possession. We realize that we have players that have the creativity to create chances and to dominate the game from a possession-based perspective. The goalkeeper doesn't need to contribute to this. Just roll it to a central defender or a fullback, from time to time to the playmaker, depending on who's marked and who isn't. And that's okay. So, no specific requirements for the goalkeepers here. And that's good. It's not none of their strengths. And out of possession, we went with a high press. We tried to prevent short goalkeeper distribution. If the opponent went with long balls most of the time anyway, we didn't care. So we took this off, not to tire out our own strikers. Depending on how the opponent plays, we kept the press though. We triggered the press most of the time. Yeah, so as a result, if you play with a higher defensive line and a high press, and you prevent short distribution, this usually implies that for some reason a long ball will be played. And a long ball is really easy to defend if you've got two central defenders that are rather strong, have moderately okay positioning, and really decent jumping reach. The headers they play in defense more often than not end up with the opponent anyway. But in that situation, the opponent is faced with the midfield press. And that worked. So most of the time we were able to recycle possession that way. Just by forcing the opponent to into playing to our strengths. There's that. And then we trap them outside. Why is that? Well, plain and simple, we don't fear crosses. Now, we conceded after some crosses, but we'd rather have the opponent outside, and they need to take the cross, so they are faced with our superior jumping in central defense, then trying to open it up and unnecessarily give away space in the penalty area. So there's that. That's it. That's all we did. And we managed to adapt to circumstances within the game from time to time. To be perfectly honest, sometimes it didn't work. But it worked good enough to get promoted, even with this club. And that's probably the primary lesson out of this. Whatever you see on YouTube, whoever it is, don't download a tactic, don't try to fit a squad into something that you think is worthwhile. Adapt the squad to the circumstances, adapt the tactical instructions to the circumstances, and then incremental changes. Incremental improvements going forward. Doesn't matter if it's a player signing or if you just realize, oh, he's no good at it. He shouldn't play that role. He shouldn't do this or that in that role. We realized after 2/3 of the season that the long balls provided by Smajlović didn't end up with any of the wingers. He played them towards the striker time and time again, no matter what we instructed him. He played a lot of long balls towards Woldsund, and Woldsund is not a good jumper. He's not a good header. He's not a good striker in that perspective. From that perspective, so we took it off. We managed to go up despite that. Yeah. So hopefully that was worthwhile to you. In case you're interested in one of the games, just how we did with this tactic and why we chose to do this or that like this, and how we fared against different opposition, you can look into the stream. There's I think 70 episode or something of the whole stream, uncut live, like it was provided to Twitch in this channel. You can pick the games if you're interested in one or the other game and skip through it, or watch the entire thing, whatever suits you. In any case, I hope this has been helpful to some of you, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comments, or, well, you might as well come over to Twitch at some point and ask me live. No problem. So, have a nice day, and thanks for watching.